The UK had the hottest June on record, the Met Office has confirmed. The average monthly temperature of 15.8 centigrade exceeded the previous highest average June temperature recorded in 1940 and 1976 by 0.9 centigrade. Climate change made the chance of surpassing the previous joint record at least twice as likely, scientists also said. Records were broken in 72 of 97 areas in the UK from where temperature data is collected. As well as the overall UK June record, England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland each recorded their warmest June since the Met Office started collecting the data in 1884. It's officially the hottest June on record for the UK, for mean temperature as well as average maximum and minimum temperature, said Met Office's Climate Science Manager Mark McCarthy. An increase of 0.9 centigrade may not seem like a huge amount, but it's really significant because it has taken the average daytime and nighttime temperatures for the whole of the UK, Paul Davies, Met Office Climate Extremes Principal Fellow and Chief Meteorologist, has mentioned. That's significant in a warming climate and because of the consequential impacts on society. He also said that while the UK recorded a higher one-off temperature of 40.3 centigrade last summer, the difference last month was the sustained heat both day and night. Rain was also in short supply for much of the month, with just a 68% of the average June rainfall. Wales was particularly dry, with just over half of its average monthly rainfall. The Met Office used a supercomputer to analyse the temperatures and identify the fingerprint of climate change on the weather. We found that the chance of observing a June beating the previous joint 1940 and 1976 record of 14.9 centigrade has at least doubled since the 1940s. Alongside natural variability, the background warming of the Earth's atmosphere due to human-induced climate change has driven up the possibility of reaching record high temperatures. Climate change is driving extreme weather events around the world. The world has warmed by about 1.1 centigrade since the Industrial Revolution about 200 years ago. Greenhouse gases have been pumped into the atmosphere by activities such as burning fuels, which have heated up the Earth's atmosphere. Last year, the UK recorded temperatures above 40 centigrade for the first time. Scientists said that would have been virtually impossible without climate change. The dry and warm weather last month affected wildlife and nature, with environment groups warning of fish deaths and flowering plants wilting. Nature is being pounded by extreme weather without a chance to recover, the wildlife trusts have mentioned. Drivers paid an extra 6p per litre for fuel at supermarkets last year as weak competition allowed stores to push up profit margins, a watchdog says. The Competition and Markets Authority, CMA, said this meant drivers using supermarkets had been faced with additional costs of around £900 million. Ministers are backing the CMA's call for a fuel finder scheme to help drivers find better live prices online. CMA boss Sarah Cardle said something needs to change swiftly. We've seen retail margins increase over the last few years, and that means that motorists are paying more at the pump than they would be if competition was working really well. Petrol and diesel prices spiked to record highs in the immediate aftermath of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but have dropped significantly since then. The CMA has been investigating the UK fuel market amid concerns that falling wholesale prices are not being passed on to consumers. According to the watchdog, supermarkets were usually the cheapest place for fuel, but competition was not working as well as it should be. It found that, on average, annual supermarket margins on fuel had increased by 6p per litre between 2019 and 2022. Morrison's and Asda's targeted fuel margins for 2023 had doubled and tripled respectively since 2019. Sainsbury's and Tesco had followed suit and raised their prices, suggesting competition had weakened. Increased margins on diesel across all retailers had cost drivers an extra 13p per litre from January 2023 to the end of May 2023. The RAC's spokesman Simon Williams said the extra costs for consumers were nothing short of astounding in a cost of living crisis, and confirms what we've been saying for many years, that supermarkets haven't been treating drivers fairly at the pumps. Asda, which was separately fined £60,000 by the CMA for failing to provide information in a timely manner to the investigation, said it was still the cheapest traditional supermarket for fuel. Morrison said its pricing was extremely competitive, and while margins had increased, they remain very low. The government is backing the CMA's call for a fuel finder scheme, which will enable drivers access to live station-by-station fuel prices on their phones or sat-navs. At present, retailers only provide price information at petrol stations, themselves making it hard to compare rates. The government said that the law would be changed to force fuel retailers to share information. A new fuel monitor oversight body will also be set up to scrutinise prices. Grant Shapps, the Energy Security Secretary, said the changes would shine a light on rip-off retailers to drive down prices, but the AA said it had been calling for this type of price tracking more than a decade, when it first investigated similar schemes in Austria and Denmark. Sadly, it has taken more than 15 years for a government and competition watchdog to recognise this and do something about it, said spokesman Luke Bodset. However, he said access to live pricing would be a huge leap forward and needs to be in place by the end of the year. Drivers will be drawn to the cheaper fuel stations, and that will pressure other forecourts to bring down their prices, thus stimulating the level of competition that has been missing for the past 3 years. As of Monday, unleaded petrol costs on average 143.86 pence per litre, while diesel costs 145.54 pence, according to RAC data. That is down sharply from the record highs seen last July, but still above pre-pandemic levels. The CMA is also investigating complaints that supermarkets are not passing on falling food prices to consumers. It comes as food price inflation on items like bread, cereal and chocolate remains close to a 45-year high at 18.3%. Supermarkets deny profiteering, telling MPs last week the industry is the most competitive we have ever been. How to save money on petrol and diesel. Watch your speed. The RAC says 45 to 50 miles per hour is the most efficient speed to drive for fuel efficiency. Switch off the air conditioning. Extra energy is needed to power a car's air conditioning system, and turning it on can increase your fuel consumption by up to 10%, according to the AA. And check your tyre pressure. Underinflated tyres will use up extra petrol. Check your pressures regularly, especially before heading off on a long journey. Former official Sue Gray broke civil service rules after failing to declare contact with Labour over a job offer, a Cabinet Office inquiry has found. Miss Gray, who led a probe into lockdown parties in Downing Street, was cleared to work for Labour by Parliament's Appointments Advisor last week. It said she could start as Sir Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff in September. Labour said all rules were followed and branded the inquiry a political stunt. The party said the Cabinet Office had spent weeks wasting time on this Mickey Mouse nonsense. We're looking forward to Sue Gray joining us this September as we continue to show the country that only Labour can build a better Britain, a Labour spokesperson said. Labour said Miss Gray only had one phone call with Sir Keir before she resigned in March, and the conversation did not relate to any government business. Civil servants who develop and implement government policies are expected to be politically impartial. In a statement, Cabinet Office Minister Jeremy Quinn said the government's inquiry found the code was prima facie broken as a result of the undeclared contact between Miss Gray and the leader of the opposition. Mr Quinn said Miss Gray was given the opportunity to make representations but chose not to do so. However, the Cabinet Office cannot impose any retrospective punishments as Miss Gray is no longer working for the government. The rules and guidance that govern the conduct of civil servants are clear and transparent, Mr Quinn said. It is deeply unfortunate that events have transpired in this way. Miss Gray was thrust into the public spotlight last year when she led an investigation into gatherings in government offices during the COVID-19 pandemic, while Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. Her report found staff attended events on multiple occasions, while the rest of the UK was in lockdown, and partly blamed the leadership in Downing Street. Mr Johnson faced calls to resign following the report, which contributed to the Tory disquiet that led to his downfall as Prime Minister. Some Tories had expressed anger that Miss Gray was offered a job as the Labour leader's Chief of Staff, arguing it undermined the impartiality of her inquiry into lockdown-breaking parties. Last week, the Advisory Committee on Business Appointments, ACOBA, said Miss Gray had to wait until September to start her new role with Labour. Miss Gray told ACOBA she received a call from Sir Keir in October last year when he raised the idea of her working for Labour in a senior capacity. The committee said it was quite normal for individuals to discuss the possibility of new roles before leaving office, but any potential conflict must be declared. The committee said there was no evidence her contact with Labour had impacted her actions in her civil service role or her ability to remain impartial. However, it said there remained a potential risk to perceived impartiality of the civil service that would be exacerbated if she took up the job immediately on leaving office. As well as a 6-month break, the committee also recommended Miss Gray should not be personally involved in lobbying the government on behalf of the opposition for 2 years from the date she left the civil service. With a general election expected next year, Miss Gray will play a key role in helping Labour prepare for government if it wins power. A Scottish mum who received a heart transplant has told how her 6-year-old daughter saved her life twice using a smart speaker. Emma Anderson from Royston in Glasgow was 15 when she was diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. From a young age, her daughter Darcy knew her mum had a sore heart and she could call for help on Alexa. Now Darcy has used Alexa twice to raise the alarm when her 27-year-old mum has been unwell. I set up the Alexa so that if I passed out or was feeling unwell, all she had to do was say, "Alexa, call for help," and that would call my mum who lives around the corner, Miss Anderson said. And she's had to call on Alexa a couple of times. She even called an ambulance on her own, and that time I was in a really bad way. I'm so proud of her, she's a wee superstar. Miss Anderson's explained her health condition to Good Morning Scotland programme. Basically it means that the muscle surrounding the heart starts to grow too thick. The way I was kind of described it was, instead of beating against a cushion, it's like every beat the heart is beating against a brick wall, so it's getting more and more damaged each time. Mostly managed by medication through her life, she was told at a routine checkup that she needed a life-saving heart transplant urgently. I went in for my routine checkup and was told that it had gotten really bad and I couldn't wait on the routine list at home anymore. I had to come in and be put on an urgent list because basically if I left the hospital I didn't have much time left. I went into hospital and a few months in my heart completely failed. I ended up on an aortic balloon pump which kept my heart beating for me until we could hopefully get a transplant. And then it was about 10 days after going on that we got a call saying a donor heart was available. Emma received the transplant in April 2022 at the NHS Golden Jubilee Hospital in Clydebank. When first diagnosed, she had an internal defibrillator implanted inside her chest, which fired 3 times last year. She said the heart transplant had been transformative and she was able to marry her partner Connor last July. Miss Anderson said, "Since my transplant I have a totally new life now. I can actually walk to school and pick Darcy up and walk back again, something I could never do before. Over Easter I managed to take Darcy swimming and to the play park, the farm park, simple things I wasn't able to do before. I can do now. I'm able to be a mummy now." About 28,000 Scots have an inherited heart condition, the most common being hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, according to the British Journal of Cardiology. Miss Anderson said she was eternally grateful to her donor and their family for what they have done for her. Getting a transplant is a very hard road, it's not easy. I was on life support and all sorts of other treatments after my operation for a long while, and my muscles deteriorated so much I couldn't walk anymore. The only thing I seemed to care about once I was better was learning to walk again so I could walk down the aisle and get married. I was literally discharged just over a week before the wedding. I still had stitches in walking down the aisle. While recovering in hospital, Miss Anderson created a TikTok video with images of different stages of her heart journey using Scots singing star Tom Walker's song "The Best Is Yet to Come." The singer was so touched by the video he invited her to London to appear in a video featuring people who had inspired him. She said, "Tom contacted me and asked me to go down to London and be part of his music video to raise awareness. So I went down and did that with other people who were absolutely incredible, who had been through a lot in life too, and it was so nice of Tom to recognise that through his inspiring music. Like the lyrics say, I definitely think the best is yet to come for me thanks to my organ donor. It's a horrible situation to be in, but I'm eternally grateful. There are no words I could put into what that donor family has done for me and my family and my child. Chief Executive of NHS Golden Jubilee, Gordon James, said, "As we celebrate 75 years of the NHS, Emma's inspiring story shows us how valuable and crucial the life-saving care the NHS provides is to our patients." A Sussex Police Community Support Officer (PCSO) was shown refusing to respond to an alleged assault in a supermarket in a video posted on TikTok. The video shows a man telling the officer about a fight in the Co-op store in Lancing, which has been reported to the police. The PCSO said, "I'm not a response unit." Sussex Police said it had launched an investigation. The man, who was filmed in conversation with the PCSO, said members of the public were trying to stop a shoplifter. He said to the PCSO, "You need to get round to the Co-op, there's just been a fight round there, because people are trying to stop the shoplifter that you're doing nothing about." He said, "People have called the police and you're sitting here." The officer responded, "I'm not a response unit, unfortunately." The man said the sight of the police car would make them scatter. The officer replied, "Yeah, but then I have to deal with it. That's why I'm here and not round there." In a statement, Sussex Police said, "We are aware of video footage of a single crude police community support officer being approached by a member of the public to report an incident in Lancing. The matter was reported to us, and a police officer attended the incident as an emergency. The PCSO has also then attended the scene." The Superintendent, Nick Dice, said, "We are sorry for the clumsy language used by the PCSO in this exchange and acknowledge the public's concern. A police unit was dispatched to the scene as a matter of priority. Our response to this incident is being reviewed." Katie Bourne, Sussex Police and Crime Commissioner, said she shared the public's disappointment and understandable concern with the video. "A member of the public sent me the video and I immediately shared it with the Chief Constable, who referred the incident to the Sussex Professional Standards Department." She added, "This is not the sort of response that I would expect and the public deserve." The role of PCSO was introduced in 2002 to support police neighbourhood policing teams. They do not have powers of arrest, cannot interview prisoners, or carry out the high-risk tasks of police officers. They may use reasonable force to prevent a person making off while waiting for a constable or accompanying them to a police station. Media watchdog Ofcom has launched an investigation into a recent episode of Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's GB News show. The 9th of May episode of State of the Nation featured the MP covering a breaking news story about a civil trial verdict involving Donald Trump. The regulator received 40 complaints. Ofcom said, "We are investigating whether this programme broke our rules, which prevent politicians from acting as newsreaders unless exceptionally it is editorially justified. Serving politicians are, however, allowed to host current affairs shows as long as a range of views are reflected." Sir Jacob, a former cabinet minister, hosts the hour-long evening show from Mondays to Thursdays. The episode in question saw him discuss a US civil jury's ruling that Mr. Trump sexually abused writer E. Jean Carroll in Manhattan in the 1990s. Meanwhile, the regulator will also investigate an episode of a talk TV show presented by former Scottish First Minister Alex Salmond. An Ofcom spokesperson said, "We're investigating whether this programme broke our rules requiring news and current affairs to be presented with due impartiality." The episode from the 2nd of April received 2 complaints in relation to a discussion about the Scottish National Party, or SNP. Ofcom is still also investigating an episode of Saturday Morning with Esther and Philip on GB News, hosted by husband and wife Conservatives MPs Esther McVeigh and Philip Davies. The rules around politicians presenting programmes were introduced in 2005. They say politicians are not normally allowed to be newsreaders, interviewers or reporters in news programmes, but confront current affairs shows. The watchdog recently launched a consultation into its rules. Given a rise in the number of current affairs programmes presented by sitting politicians and recent public interest in this issue, we are conducting new research to gauge current audience attitudes towards these programmes, it said last month. The findings will be published later this year. A father has died in hospital following a house fire in which his son was killed on Saturday. South Wales Police named the victims as Naimat Lawa Ismail, aged 51, and his 3-year-old son Mohammed Ismail. Emergency services were called to an address on Gom Hill in West Cross, Swansea at around 1:30 p.m. on Saturday. The Welsh Ambulance Service said 3 people were taken to the city's Morriston Hospital. Another child and a woman suffered smoke inhalation. Neighbour Siani Martin, whose home overlooks the house, described the people living there as a beautiful family who are loved by everyone. All of us, the community, we're just praying for them. We just want them to know that we're here, she said. Miss Martin said she heard a bang shortly after 1 p.m. on Saturday, about 5 minutes after she had returned inside from watching planes fly over as part of the Swansea Air Show. I thought it was part of the air show and then just heard screaming. After that, it's kind of a blur. Just black smoke coming out, people running everywhere trying to do something. Police said an investigation was being carried out to establish the exact circumstances of the fire, which was contained to one house. Detective Inspector Carl Price said, "Our thoughts remain with the family, friends and the local community following this tragic incident. We are working alongside the fire service to establish the cause of the fire. An online page set up to raise money for those affected has so far raised more than £15,000. Police have carried out a security review at one of their Antrim facilities after it emerged a man armed with a knife gained entry to the grounds of a training site. Ulster Unionist Policing Board member Mike Nesbitt said it had shocked him. He questioned whether it is appropriate to have a private security firm guarding Police Service of Northern Ireland (PSNI) facilities. The practice has been in place for years. The PSNI said it takes the safety of officers and staff extremely seriously and has conducted a review of site security. The incident happened on Sunday the 11th of June at a training facility in the town's Steeple area. According to the BBC's Nolan radio programme, the man waved a knife at 2 guards in a security hut before going into the complex, where he tried to access buildings. He left after 40 minutes. A 43-year-old man was subsequently arrested in relation to the incident and is due to appear in court later this month. In a statement, the PSNI said, "We take the safety of our officers and staff extremely seriously, and as a result of the incident, have conducted an internal review of site security in line with existing procedures. We can confirm that all buildings within the training facility were secured and no access was gained." Mr Nesbitt and his board colleague Trevor Clark of the DUP both said they were concerned that the policing board was only told of the incident 3 days ago. They said they will raise it with the Chief Constable Simon Byrne at a meeting later this week. A D4S Secure Solutions UK spokesperson said, "We take all matters of security very seriously. Any investigations into any matters of concern are conducted in conjunction with the PSNI and, if necessary, corrective measures put in place." Train drivers in the ASLEF Union have announced a fresh overtime ban, which will see services further disrupted. Drivers at 15 train companies based in England will refuse to work overtime from Monday 17th to the Saturday 22nd of July. It will coincide with strike action by rail workers in the RMT Union, also taking place later this month. And it follows the overtime ban currently taking place over pay and conditions, which is disrupting services across the rail network. Most train companies rely on drivers working overtime to run their full schedules, which ASLEF says is a consequence of operators not employing enough people. Strikes by other rail workers in the RMT Union are set to take place later this month on the 20th, the 22nd and the 29th of July. Many will reduce their service levels and passengers are being advised to check before they travel. Among the disrupted expected this week, South Western Railway said it would run a reduced timetable, with some first and last trains cancelled. Its services are likely to be busier than usual, and passengers heading to the Wimbledon Tennis Championships are advised to allow extra time for journeys. Gatwick Express is not running this week, but the airport will still be served by Southern and Thameslink. Northern, advised passengers to expect some services to start later and finish earlier than usual, as well as short notice cancellations. Great Western Railway expect some short notice alterations or cancellations, and said its Night Riviera sleeper service would not run in either direction until Sunday. And Chiltern Railways warned customers only to travel if absolutely essential on Saturday. Its trains would not stop at the station by Wembley Stadium, which is hosting a concert by Blur. The announcement of the new overtime ban comes after ASLEF General Secretary Mick Whelan had warned that further industrial action was likely. He mentioned on the BBC's Today programme on Monday the Rail Delivery Group's latest pay offer, worth 4% for 2 years in a row and linked to reforms, was like a return to Victorian times. The long-running pay dispute by train drivers centres around union members accepting a deal which would have brought drivers to average pay to £65,000. This offer has already been rejected by ASLEF, but it would have been dependent on changes to working practices, which the employers and government say are needed to cut costs and modernise how the railways run. Mr. Whelan said the situation was a Westminster ideological problem and claimed the union did not have issues in Scotland, Wales with freight, the London Underground, Crossrail or Eurostar. We did 14 pay deals in the last 12 months. The only place we can't get a pay deal is with the Westminster government, he added. The Rail Delivery Group RDG said ASLEF had rejected a fair and affordable offer without putting it to its members. We ask ASLEF to recognise the very real financial challenge the industry is facing and work with us to deliver a better, more reliable railway with a stronger long-term future, it added. Meanwhile, the strike action between operators and the RMT over pay, jobs and conditions has lasted for more than a year. With only 12% of tickets sold from ticket offices according to the RDG, train companies are preparing to move ahead with plans to close hundreds of station kiosks. Under proposed changes, staff would be moved onto concourses to help and advise more customers, an RDG spokesperson said. But RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch said last week his union would not meekly sit by and allow thousands of jobs to be sacrificed or see disabled and vulnerable passengers left unable to use the railways as a result. The union suggested it could take further industrial action over the issue. A group of Tory MPs is calling on Prime Minister Rishi Sunak to drastically cut migration, warning the failure to do so risks eroding public trust. The New Conservatives have issued a 12-point plan to cut net migration by around 400,000 before the next election. The group of MPs recommended closing visa schemes for care workers, increasing salary thresholds and capping refugee numbers. But critics say the proposals would have consequences for the UK economy. Mr Sunak's official spokesman said the government believes it is striking the right balance between keeping migration as low as possible while providing staff for key areas. The UK's overall population grew by more than 600,000 people last year, according to the latest figures from the Office for National Statistics. The ONS said that the rise was largely driven by more people from outside the EU arriving on student and work visas and refugees fleeing conflict and persecution in Ukraine and Hong Kong. The sharp increase represents a huge political challenge for Mr Sunak and the Conservatives, who have repeatedly promised to reduce net migrations since taking power in 2010. The party's 2019 manifesto committed to getting the number down without setting a specific target, while former Conservative Prime Minister David Cameron once pledged to bring net migration below 100,000. In a report launched on Monday, the New Conservatives say the British public did not vote for mass migration and the social and economic harms it brings. Without swift action to get migration under control, the Conservative Party will further erode the trust of hundreds of thousands of voters who lent their party their vote in 2019, the report states. The report was written by Tory MP Tom Hunt and backed by a group of like-minded Conservatives, including the party's Deputy Chairman, Lee Anderson, Miriam Cates and James Daly. At the report's launch, Mr Hunt, Miss Cates and Mr Daly insisted they were loyal to the Prime Minister, but felt his government could go further on cutting immigration. One of the report's main recommendations is closing temporary schemes that grant eligibility for worker visas to care workers. The report says the policy will reduce visas granted by 117,000 leading to a reduction in long-term inward migration to the UK of 82,000. Part of this proposed policy involves only allowing in skilled workers who earn £38,000 a year or more. A report by the Skills for Care charity said the number of vacancies in social care was set at its highest rate on record, with 165,000 unfilled posts in 2021 and 2022. Sam Monaghan, the chief executive at Methodist Homes, said not being able to recruit carers from overseas would put more pressure on the sector. Cutting off a key supply of care workers at a time when 500,000 people nationwide are waiting for care is not the answer. Mr Sunak's official spokesman said the government was not planning to remove care workers from the shortage occupation list. The government was using the flexibility we have through our migration system to ensure we have sufficient staff in key areas and looking to boost the numbers of domestic care staff that are available, Downing Street said. Ms Cates told the BBC the UK needed to cut off the supply of cheap foreign labour and encourage from British people to fill jobs in the care sector. She said scrapping temporary visa schemes for care workers would force employers to look at recruiting local young people. We are never ever going to make that possible unless we close the immigration route first, the Tory MP said. But fellow Tory MP Tim Loughton said that while the principle of reducing net migration was right, there was a shortage of care workers in the UK. It's not as simple as just putting the salary thresholds up as well, he said. There's quite a lot of skilled but lower paid people that we need coming into this country. Some of the report's other proposals include tightening restrictions on student visas to stop graduates staying in the UK for longer than 2 years without a job offer, capping the number of refugees legally accepted for resettlement in the UK at 20,000, a 5% cap on the amount of social housing that councils can give to non-UK nationals, and raising the health surcharge that an individual immigrant would pay to use the NHS to £2,700 per person per year. Madeline Sumpton, director of the Migration Observatory at the University of Oxford, said trying to predict the impact of individual policy changes on migration is very hard. Even the most fastidious attempts to model the impacts of policy on numbers, and this isn't one of them, will usually be wrong. She said immigration policy was a political choice, and there was no reason the UK couldn't choose to be more restrictive. But she said the report does not engage with any of the trade-offs that more restrictive measures involve. For example, one of the reasons demand for care workers has been so high is limited public funding in the care system. International students have been a growing source of revenue for universities, so proposals that would reduce student numbers cannot be considered in isolation from the funding of higher education. She said that some of the proposals in the report were a bit outlandish. Net migration is expected to decline anyway over the coming years, even without policy changes, she added. However, if they want more significant restrictions, it requires an honest conversation about the wider consequences and how to mitigate them. There have been intense exchanges of fire between Israeli forces and armed Palestinian militants in a Jenin refugee camp in the occupied West Bank. The Israeli military began what appears to be one of its most extensive operations in the territory in years with drone strikes early on Monday. 8 Palestinians have been killed and 50 injured, health officials say. Israel said it had dealt a heavy blow to terrorist organizations, but Palestinians accused it of a war crime. An Israeli military spokesman said there was no specific timeline for ending the operation, but that it could take hours or maybe a day or two. Jenin has become a stronghold of a new generation of Palestinian militants. It has seen repeated Israeli military raids in the past year, and local Palestinians have been linked to multiple shooting attacks targeting Israelis. In 2002, during the Second Palestinian Intifada, Israeli forces launched a full-scale incursion in Jenin. At least 52 Palestinian militants and civilians and 23 Israeli soldiers were killed, and much of the camp was flattened during 10 days of intense fighting. As well as the hum of drones overhead, there are regularly bursts of gunfire and the loud thuds of explosions coming from the densely populated refugee camps which is home to some 14,000 people and is now a closed Israeli military zone. The Israeli military said its first drone strike overnight targeted an apartment that was being used as a hideout for Palestinians who had attacked Israelis and as a joint operational command center for the Jenin Brigades, a unit made up of different Palestinian militant groups, including Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Drones were used for further airstrikes, and thousands of Israeli troops were deployed in what a military spokesman described as a counter-terrorism operation, focused on seizing weapons and breaking the safe haven mindset of the camp, which has become a hornet's nest. Amid intense gun battles between the troops and Palestinian militants, the Jenin Brigades said, "We will fight the occupation Israeli forces until the last bullet. And we work together and unified from all factions and military formations." Ahmed Zaki, a resident of the camp, said that columns of Israeli army vehicles penetrated the outskirts of the camp from several streets. Palestinian ambulance driver Khaled Al-Ahmad said, "What is going on in the refugee camp is real war. There were strikes from the sky targeting the camp. Every time we drive in around 5 to 7 ambulances and we come back full with injured people," he told Reuters news agency. The Palestinian Health Ministry said 8 Palestinians had been killed by Israeli forces, including 3 in the overnight drone strike. They all appeared to be young men or in their late teens, some confirmed as belonging to armed groups. The ministry warned that the death toll might rise because 10 of the injured were in a critical condition. Another Palestinian was killed by Israeli forces during a related protest near the West Bank city of Ramallah, it added. The Israeli military spokesman said its forces had neutralized 7 Palestinian terrorists in Jenin overnight. Israeli Defense Yoav Gallant later declared that the Jenin operation was progressing as planned. "We dealt a heavy blow to the terror organizations in Jenin and managed to record impressive operational achievements." Foreign Minister Eli Cohen said Israel was not intending to expand the operation to the rest of the West Bank. "Our goal is to focus on Jenin, and our goal is to focus only on the terrorists and their cells," he told reporters. A spokesman for Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas condemned the Israeli operation as a new war crime against our defenseless people that would not bring security and stability to the region. Nabil Abu Radeni stressed that Palestinians would remain steadfast on their land in the face of this brutal aggression until the occupation is defeated and freedom is achieved. There has been a surge of violence in the West Bank in recent months. On the 20th of June, 7 Palestinians were killed during an Israeli raid in Jenin, which saw the military's first use of an attack helicopter in the West Bank in years. The next day, 2 Hamas gunmen shot dead 4 Israelis at a petrol station and restaurant near the settlement of Eli, 40 kilometers or 25 miles south of Jenin. A Palestinian man was later shot dead during a rampage by hundreds of settlers who torched homes and cars in the nearby town of Terma Saya. That week also saw 3 Palestinian militants from Jenin killed in a rare Israeli drone strike, after they allegedly carried out a shooting attack at a checkpoint near the city. Since the start of the year, more than 140 Palestinians, both militants and civilians, have been killed by Israeli forces or settlers in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem, while another 36 had been killed in the Gaza Strip. 27 people on the Israeli side had been killed, including 2 foreigners and a Palestinian worker, in attacks or apparent attacks by Palestinians. All were civilians except 1 off-duty serving soldier and a member of the Israeli security forces. Riots in France appear to be calming after 5 days of violent protests in response to the shooting of teenager Nahel M. during a police traffic stop. Sunday night saw violence subside and fewer arrests were made. However, President Emmanuel Macron has asked the Interior Ministry to keep a massive police presence on the streets. On Monday, mayors called for rallies to be held outside town halls to protest the violence and looting. In Nanterre, Nahel's hometown, Mayor Patrick Jarry said he was pleased the violence had subsided, but added that we shouldn't lose sight of the incident that sparked this situation and the continuing need for justice. The mayor of Reims, a city just over 2 hours away from Paris, told a crowd of several hundred people that the rioters had looted the businesses that they visit every day. While Sunday night was far calmer, authorities were careful not to prematurely hail a return to normality on Monday. Buses and trams in the Paris region will again be halted early on Monday night, while President Macron has asked the Ministry of the Interior to maintain a massive police presence across France in order to guarantee a return to calm. About 45,000 officers had been deployed across the country for the past 3 nights. More than 150 people were arrested on Sunday night, compared with more than 700 the night before. There were 297 cars set on fire compared with Thursday's 1,900, while 34 buildings were damaged or set ablaze, compared with more than 500 on Thursday. In a press release shared on Sunday, an association of the country's mayors noted that communes everywhere in France are the scene of serious unrest, which targets Republican symbols with extreme violence. In one act of violence, the home of a suburban Paris mayor was attacked, and rioters fired rockets at his fleeing wife and children, breaking her leg and injuring one of the children. The incident is being treated as attempted murder. At the weekend, the family of Nahel, the teenager who was killed by police, called for the violence to end. His grandmother accused rioters of using Nahel's death as an excuse and urged them to stop destroying public goods. Another relative told the BBC that the family did not want his death to spark riots, but insisted the law around lethal force at traffic stops must change. She also said her heart is in pain, and a GoFundMe page for the family of the police officer who shot Nahel, which as of Monday had raised more than €1 million or £859,963, with over 50,000 donations. The fundraiser, which was set up by a far-right media commentator, has been criticised by several politicians, but the platform told French newspaper Le Parisien that GoFundMe's terms and conditions were not being broken because the funds are destined for the officer's family and not meant for the legal defence of an alleged violent crime. On Tuesday, President Macron will meet the mayors of 220 municipal areas that have been affected by the violence. On Sunday, a 24-year-old fireman was killed while seeking to douse several cars, which has been set alight in an underground car park in Saint-Denis, north of Paris. Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin said. A spokesperson for the Paris Fire Brigade has told the BBC that there is at this stage no formal link with the violence that has rocked France, but the Interior Ministry said an investigation was underway to determine the circumstances of the fire. It was a wary-sounding question directed by a middle-aged Frenchwoman. Could you just go home? At a gang of youths pushing past her as a massive defence shield-wielding riot police chased after them. It was the early hours of Sunday morning on the Champs-Élysées, the tourist shoppers' paradise in central Paris. The air was acrid with tear gas, night number 5 of the street riots that had engulfed France since the killing of Nahel, a French-Algerian teen, by a policeman on the Parisian housing estate. My colleagues and I were filming the chaos all around when it struck me just how many people in France have posed the same question as the irritated lady. The acts of violence across France dropped considerably overnight, the rioters shamed perhaps by Nahel's grandma, who took to French TV to appeal to the youngsters to calm down. They spoke to another family member who asked to remain anonymous because tensions are still running so high. Visibly agitated, she told them they ache for the rioters to stay home. Nahel's relatives never called for acts of hate or theft or destruction in his name, she insists. In fact, they all worry the violence could distract from what they do want: justice. For them, that means the police officer who killed Nahel sentenced and imprisoned. Emmanuel Macron is fervently hoping the protesters and tag-along vandals stay home for so many reasons. His second term as French president has been peppered by civil unrest over pension reforms, and now Nahel's death. It's not exactly improving his popularity ratings. Teacher Abdel, who lives on the same estate as Nahel, told them Mr. Macron was fully to blame. His economic reforms are a disaster. France is crumbling, he said, along with its education system. Abdel was convinced disgruntled unemployed young men from disadvantaged neighbourhoods were at least partly responsible for the street violence. They're behind the scenes, pushing these teenagers. Abdul's neighbours bring out their mobile phones each morning to photograph the smouldering remains of the latest riot devastation. They also told them they wish the youngsters would stop. Student Celia said she worries the violence could end in a backlash against their whole community. On Sunday night, the mums in Aulnay, a working-class area near Paris, took to the streets themselves, waving banners calling for an end to the violence. President Macron appealed to the mamans et papas, the mums and dads of the rioters last week, to keep them at home and off social media, which he said allow inflammatory material to circulate. The crisis is also weakening Macron politically, under fire from the political left and right over what best to do next. The left accuses him of neglecting the poor and the marginalised. The right demands he cracks down harder on the violence, imposing a nationwide state of emergency. But the optics would be tricky for the French president. He'd worry a crackdown like that could ignite an even greater rage on the streets and further tarnish France's international standing. Mr. Macron was forced by this crisis to leave last week's summit of EU leaders, where they discussed Europe's biggest emergency, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And this weekend, the president had to cancel a much-discussed state visit to important EU ally Germany, the first by a French president in 23 years. While in the world of sport, questions are being asked as to whether France can be trusted to safely host international events like the world's biggest cycling championship, the Tour de France. It concludes in 3 weeks on the Champs-Élysées, a favourite spot for rioters, as we learned at the start of this article. The Rugby World Cup is due to begin in France in September. France is also set to host next year's Summer Olympics. It escaped no one's attention here that an Olympic swimming complex was targeted by rioters on one of the first nights of turmoil following Nahel's death. Talking to the protesters themselves, and many say staying home on their housing estates is far from straightforward. They feel unsafe. They say because of regular confrontations with police, the UN has accused France's security forces of systematic racism. Activists like Assa Traoré, whose brother died 7 years ago following his arrest, told them being a young black or Arab man on a housing estate in France means being regularly exposed to police brutality and racial profiling. Until France recognises the problem is endemic, she says there will be a lot more Nahels. But the Secretary General of one of France's powerful police unions, Unite SGP, flatly denies the allegations of systemic racism. Jean-Christophe Couvi says France is not the US. We don't have ghettos. He said, our forces represent France's multicultural societies with officers from all backgrounds. You'll find maybe 1% of racists, like in the rest of society, but no more. Mr. Couvi didn't want to discuss the specifics of Nahel's case, as it's an open investigation. So they asked him he would go about improving relations with the police around the estates. The best way forward is to return to a system of community policing in France, where we know each other by our first names. Right now in France, they said policing has become a box-ticking exercise of showing how many people each officer detains for questioning to demonstrate he or she is working hard. The problem with that is it becomes like two opposing gangs on the streets, police versus the inhabitants of the estates. Back in January, French Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne launched a new action plan against racism, but it's been criticised for its silence on racial profiling by French police. Last summer, the Council of Europe's European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance released its 6th report on France, highlighting little progress on curtailing the use of ethnic profiling by law enforcement officers. Not all the rioters on France's streets were triggered by Nahel's death, but those who were there say loud protests are the only way that people like them get their voices heard in France. That's why they say they shouldn't sit quietly at home. France may be calming down, the large majority of the country fervently hopes so, but the spectre of potential renewed violence hangs over France. On the streets and across social media here, French men and women predict if relations between the authorities and housing states such as Nahel's remains unchanged, France's streets could easily ignite again, as they've done so many times in the past. Vietnam has banned the upcoming Barbie film over a scene featuring a map depicting contested Chinese territorial claims in the South China Sea. Vietnam is among a number of countries that contest China's claim to almost all of the South China Sea, The film about the famous doll, which has already taken over social media, is due to release in cinemas on the 21st of July. It is unclear which scene depicts what a senior official called the offensive image of China's 9-dash line. The 9-dash line is used in Chinese maps of the South China Sea to show its territorial claims. Beijing has been building military bases on artificial islands in the area for years and also often conducts naval patrols there in a bid to assert its territorial claims. In 2016, an international tribunal in The Hague ruled against Chinese claims in the South China Sea, but Beijing did not recognize the judgment. Film studio Warner Bros. Barbie is not the only production to be banned by Vietnam for featuring the 9-dash line. In 2019, the DreamWorks animated film Abominable was pulled for the same reason. 3 years later, the Sony action movie Uncharted also fell foul of the Department of Cinema, a government body in charge of licensing and censoring foreign films. 2 years ago, Australian spy drama Pine Gap was removed from the Vietnamese market by Netflix, following a complaint from authorities. China, Vietnam and the Philippines, Taiwan, Malaysia and Brunei all have competing claims in the South China Sea. The award-winning Ukrainian writer Victoria Amelina has died from her injuries after a Russian missile hit a pizza restaurant in the eastern city of Kramatorsk on Tuesday. The war crimes researcher becomes the 13th person to have died in the attack. The Writers Association PEN Ukraine said doctors did everything they could to save her life, but unfortunately the wound was fatal. Human rights activists have called the attack a war crime. Kramatorsk is under Ukrainian control, but is close to Russian-occupied parts of Ukraine. Amelina, aged 37, was dining with a delegation of Colombian journalists and writers in the city's popular Ria Lounge when the missile hit. Around 60 others were injured in the attack. She was rushed to hospital in Dnipro, but succumbed to her injuries on Friday. PEN Ukraine said, "It is with great pain that we inform you that the heart of the writer Victoria Amelina stopped beating on the 1st of July, the group said in a statement. In the last days of Victoria's life, her family and friends were by her side. Amelina was one of Ukraine's most celebrated young writers, who started documenting war crimes after Russia's full-scale invasion last year. She also started working with children near the front line. Last year, she unearthed the diary of children's writer Volodymyr Balakolenko, who was abducted and killed by Russian troops in the city of Izum soon after the invasion. Her first non-fiction book in English, War and Justice Diary, Looking at Women Looking at War, is due to be published. In an earlier statement confirming that Amelina has been injured in the attack, PEN Ukraine and war crimes watchdog Truth Hounds said that members of both groups had travelled to the front lines with Amelina. Now Victoria has become a victim of a war crime herself, they said. A post pinned to a Twitter profile says, Amelina taking a photo of a bombed building in Ukraine. It's me in this picture, the post reads. I'm a Ukrainian writer. I have portraits of great Ukrainian poets on my bag. I look like I should be taking pictures of books, art and my little son, but I document Russia's war crimes and listen to the sound of shelling, not poems. Why? A Thai elephant given to Sri Lanka in 2001 has returned to its birthplace after a diplomatic row over its alleged abuse. The 29-year-old Muthu Raja arrived in Thailand on Sunday on a 19 million baht or £425,000 or $540,000 commercial reparation flight. Bangkok had demanded a return of the animal after it claims it was tortured while kept at a Buddhist temple. Sri Lanka's Prime Minister said he had formally apologised to the Thai king. The 4,000kg or £8,800 elephant was airlifted to Chiang Mai in a specialty-built steel cage, accompanied by 4 Thai handlers and a Sri Lankan zookeeper. It will undergo hydrotherapy to treat an injury on its front left leg. Both Sri Lanka and Thailand consider elephants to be sacred animals. In 2001, the Thai royal family gifted 3 elephants, including Muthu Raja, to Sri Lanka's government to be trained as carriers of religious relics. Muthu Raja was placed in the care of a temple in the south of the country. Animal rights groups allege it was made to work with a logging crew in the temple, adding that it developed a stiff leg from a long neglected injury. Sri Lanka-based activist group Rally for Animal Rights and Environment, RARE, lobbied last year for Thai officials to intervene after months of unsuccessful attempts to get Sri Lanka's government to act. The group's founder, Patcheli Panaptiya, said, Ms. Panaptiya said the failure of Sri Lanka's wildlife officials to act have brought disrepute to the country. The Independent reported RARE has also petitioned for authorities to prosecute those responsible for the elephants' neglect. Sri Lankan Wildlife Minister Parithra Wanarachi told local media Thailand had been adamant in demanding that Muthu Raja be returned after its ambassador in Sri Lanka found it to be in poor health during a visit last year. Muthu Raja was in pain and covered in abscesses when removed from the temple last year. In November, AFP reported activists claim its handler inflicted some of these wounds. It was temporarily transferred to Sri Lanka's National Zoological Garden, and most of its wounds have healed in recent months. Sri Lankan Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena told his parliament in June that he had conveyed his regret to the Thai king, Maya Vajiralongkorn, over Muthu Raja's alleged abuse, and was able to re-establish trust between the two countries. The Thai government stopped sending elephants overseas about 3 years ago, following protests from activists. Thai Environment Minister Varat Silpa Aracha said in June. Bangkok's Wildlife Department said it is monitoring the condition of Thai elephants already sent overseas. Ships crisscrossing our oceans give off as much planet-warming carbon through their smokestacks in a year as the whole of Germany. The massive shipping industry is responsible for transporting 9/10 of our goods around the world, but it doesn't yet have a goal for cutting emissions to net zero. A UN summit starting on Monday hopes to change that. Reaching net zero would mean that any remaining shipping emissions were matched by actively removing greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. Some delegates want this to happen by 2050, and for emissions to be halved by 2030. Campaigners say this would be the climate deal of the decade. For years, the shipping industry, governments and environmental groups have wrangled on how to make the transport of goods by sea greener. The issue was deemed just too difficult to be included in the 2015 Paris Climate Pact to keep down global warming. It matters because around 90% of the products and goods the world consumes travel by ship. These vessels often burn highly polluting fuels, which contribute as much as 3% of the world's global carbon dioxide emissions, roughly the same amount as that of Germany or 243 coal plants. That could grow by as much as 50% by the middle of this century if stronger action isn't taken, experts have warned. The shipping industry's current plans only envisage a halving of emissions by the middle of this century, a commitment that scientists say is far out of line with the Paris Climate Agreement. This week, under the control of the UN's International Maritime Organization, IMO, delegates from 175 shipping countries will meet in London to try and agree on a new timeline for completely decarbonising their industry. Campaigners want to see a much tougher target, with a reduction of approximately half by 2030 and a new net zero goal for 2050. Others want to go further still and see a full decarbonisation brought forward to 2040. If member states get this right, they can set the shipping sector in line to meet the Paris temperature targets and promote investment in green technologies that will completely transform the sector, said Caroline Wills, Director for Ocean and Climate, UN Climate Foundation. Many countries are in favour, and some shipping companies also want to push forward with plans for cleaner transport. The world's second largest container shipping lane, Maersk, are taking a bullish approach, setting their own goal of zero emissions by 2040. Previous attempts to strengthen climate ambition at the IMO have fallen foul of a number of countries such as China, India and Saudi Arabia, who are keen to protect their own domestic shipping interests. Observers say that if the London meeting can agree these new goals for all shipping, it would be the biggest advance against climate change since the Paris Agreement. We would quite genuinely have a climate agreement, not just of the year, but probably of the decade, said John Maggs from the Clean Shipping Coalition of Campaigners, speaking to reporters. Within the wider industry, there is a recognition that reform is necessary, but there is a concern that new targets will be too challenging and expensive. However, recent research shows that cutting shipping emissions in half this decade would only add some 10% to the total cost of operations. Last week, the Secretary General of the IMO, Kitak Lim, urged delegates to make the compromises and find solutions, describing 2023 as a year of decisive climate action. His views were echoed by Faig Abbasov from Campaigners Transport and Environment. Waiting until 2050 to decarbonise is a bit like waiting until your house burns before you call the fire brigade. What is needed is political will. IMO needs to either step up or ship out. In July 2022, Twitter took the Indian government to court over its orders to block certain accounts and tweets. Several free speech experts hailed it as a significant lawsuit. It was the first instance of a social media company suing the government over its content takedown orders, often criticised for being arbitrary and opaque. Last week, the Karnataka High Court dismissed Twitter's case and imposed a fine of 5 million rupees, or $61,000 or £48,000, on the company for not complying with contested orders for over a year. Twitter has more than 24 million users in India by one estimate. The verdict has left many digital rights experts worried. The judgment reposes untrammeled power in the state to issue blocking orders that bypass procedural safeguards, said Rahika Roy, a lawyer and spokesperson for digital rights organisation Internet Freedom Foundation. She added that the court could have countered the rampant misuse of law to take down unfavourable content on the internet, rather than it being ended up as legitimising it. Commentators are apprehensive about Twitter's next move. Will the social media giant comply with the takedown orders or appeal the judgment? The case was filed by Twitter under its previous leadership. Under new owner Elon Musk, the company has complied with takedown orders. After a recent meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the US, Mr. Musk said that the company has no choice but to obey local government laws or it risks getting shut. The recent judgment raises concerns about free speech, since the government has been accused of increasing its censorship of online content in recent years. Federal Minister Rajiv Chandrasekhar has said that all foreign internet platforms had to comply with Indian laws. In 2022, India blocked 3,417 Twitter URLs, while only 8 Twitter URLs have been blocked in 2014. Twitter's case was that 39 orders of the federal government to block access to accounts and tweets went against the law. India's information technology law allows the government to block online content that threatens the security of the state and public order, among other things. It said that the government does not want to have the power to block accounts, but only specific tweets. Further, it said that the orders had not been properly reasoned and that the grounds required for taking down content had not been made out by the government. Also, users whose accounts and tweets were being blocked had not been informed by the government. The government argued that the orders were legal. It is said that the contested content was posted by anti-India campaigners, and that if such users were informed about the action being taken against them, they may choose to tweet anonymously and cause more harm. Therefore, it was appropriate that only Twitter was informed about these orders, the government said. Since the law requires these orders to be confidential, it is not clear which accounts and tweets were challenged. However, one instance cited in the judgments reveal that at least one account had posted tweets related to farmers' protest in 2021 against new farm laws brought by the government. The court has now said that the government has the power to block not just tweets, but entire accounts as well. These orders could extend indefinitely. It also added that when the government is blocking content, the user does not necessarily have to be informed. Under the law, users or in the company hosting the information, such as Twitter, have to be given a notice and a chance to be heard in court before a blocking order is passed. In cases of emergency, the government can immediately block a website and give notice later. The orders also need to have details in writing about why a website needed to be blocked. Twitter argued that this was missing in the orders the government had passed. However, the court looked at the tweets and accounts in contention and found that they had outrageous, treacherous and anti-national content, which could threaten national security and public order. It said that these details had been shared with Twitter. Further, the court accepted the government's arguments that detailed reasons had been shared with Twitter in review meetings that had taken place before the blocking order was passed. The court also said that giving notice to users was discretionary. The users in question comprised of terrorists and foreign adversaries who intend to discredit and destabilize India and jeopardize national security on communal lines. Thus, it accepted the government's argument that it was not desirable to issue notice to such anti-India campaigners. Experts say that this judgment limits users' ability to defend their ability to freedom of speech. Users won't be given a chance to defend themselves before a blocking order is passed, said Sachin Dhawan, a program manager at digital rights research body Centre for Communication Governance. Even after an order is passed, they'll be left in the dark about why their content has been blocked. As a result, a process which has already shrouded in secrecy will become even more opaque, he said. Mr. Dhawan added that this undermined basic due processes, such as giving a notice and a hearing to an aggrieved party. However, another significant case pending before the Delhi High Court may lead to a different outcome. It relates to a satirical dowry calculator website being blocked by the government without the website's founder being given a notice. In May last year, the High Court directed the government to provide the founder a copy of the order and give him a hearing, during which the ban was upheld. The court is now hearing whether the website can be blocked. The court's order to provide a copy to the founder inspires hope, Ms. Roy from Internet Freedom Foundation said. However, the final verdict is yet to be decided. Police are searching for multiple suspects after a shooting in the US city of Baltimore left 2 people dead and 28 others injured. 15 children were among those wounded when gunfire erupted at a block party in the Brooklyn Homes area of the city on Sunday. Surveillance footage from a building showed people fleeing the shooting. It is not clear whether the attack was targeted, police said, and officers are hunting for at least 2 suspects. The shooting began at around 12 a.m. or 4:35 Greenwich Mean Time in a courtyard between a pair of row houses in the south of the city. Investigators spent hours on Sunday combing a large crime scene for evidence and have appealed to the public for information. Police said 18-year-old Alea Gonzalez died at the scene, while 20-year-old Kailas Fagbemi was pronounced dead at the hospital. The victims were mostly teenagers ranging in age from 13 to 19. The others were aged 20, 22, 23, 31 and 32, according to police. As of Sunday afternoon, 9 victims remained in hospital. Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott said his office was dedicating every resource possible to finding those responsible. "We will not stop until we find you, and we will find you," he said. "This was a reckless, cowardly act that happened here. I hope that with every single breath that you take, that you think about the lives that you took, and you think about the lives that you impacted here tonight," he said. Acting Baltimore Police Commissioner Richard Worley told reporters on Sunday that the block party was unpermitted because police were not warned about it ahead of time. He added that officials would examine what actions officers took once they found out about the gathering. Witnesses at the scene said hundreds of people were at the party when the chaotic scene unfolded. Danny Gonzalez, age 57, who is not related to the woman who died in the shooting, told the Washington Post that he heard gunshots from his home and saw young people running away. It was at least 40 or 50 rounds, he said, adding that he and his neighbours were no strangers to gunfire in the Maryland port city. "It's just another killing weekend. This is Baltimore Murderland. There have been 140 homicides this year in Baltimore, according to the Baltimore Sun newspaper. In 2022, the city reported more than 300 killings for the 8th year in a row. The US in total has seen more than 330 mass shootings this year, according to the non-profit Gun Violence Archive, which defines a mass shooting as an incident in which 4 or more people are injured or killed. New Zealand has become the world's first country to expand its ban on plastic bags in supermarkets to thin bags which are typically used to hold fruits or vegetables. The move, which took effect on Saturday, is part of a wider government campaign against single-use plastics. Most shoppers already bring their own bags to stores after take-home plastic bags were banned in 2019. In recent years, many countries have imposed a fee or ban on plastic bags. New Zealand produces too much waste, too much plastic waste, Associate Environment Minister Rachel Brooking said. She added more than 1 billion plastic bags have been saved since the ban on thicker bags took effect in 2019. The new move is expected to prevent the usage of 150 million plastic bags per year. Critics have raised concerns that shoppers may just replace groceries in disposable paper bags, which are still available in supermarkets. It's still worth doing this, but we really want to reduce single-use anything packaging, Ms. Brookings said. So we want people to be bringing their own bags, and supermarkets are selling reusable produce bags, she added. Supermarket chain Countdown, which operates more than 185 stores across the country, has started selling reusable polyester mesh bags. The company hopes this will encourage shoppers to use reusable bags for fruits and vegetables. We know change is hard and it will take them a little time, said Catherine Langabeer, the head of sustainability at Countdown. We get some grumpy customers. The New Zealand government has made progress on other initiatives to tackle climate change. In October, it proposed taxing the greenhouse gases produced by farm animals like sheep and cattle. The world's first scheme will see farmers paying for agricultural emissions in some form by 2025. The country's farming industry accounts for about half of its emissions. Film stars and celebrities are calling on Wimbledon to end its new sponsorship deal with Barclays over the bank's support for fossil fuel projects. Actress Emma Thompson and film director Rich Curtis are two of the campaigners who said Barclays was profiting from climate chaos. Wimbledon said Barclays was committed to creating access to sport for all. Barclays said it was one of the first banks to set an ambition to become net zero by 2050. The All England Lawn Tennis Club, AELTC, announced Barclays as an official banking partner of the championships in November last year. As the 2023 championships get underway on Monday, Thompson and Curtis are among those to sign an open letter to the AELTC. The letter is from Make My Money Matter, a campaign group co-founded by Curtis that seeks to transform the financial system to put people and planet on a par with profit. It also has the backing of retail guru Mary Portas, entrepreneur and Dragon's Den star Deborah Meaden, Green Party MP Caroline Lucas, and musician Brian Eno, among others. For Weddings and a Funeral screenwriter Curtis said, with the great respect and love for Wimbledon and all the magic from Billie Jean King to Andy Murray, the decision of the AELTC to partner with Barclays is a very bad line call. Addressed to the chief executive of the AELTC, Sally Bolton, it states Barclays is Europe's largest fossil fuel founder, providing over $190 billion to the industry since the Paris Climate Agreement was struck in 2016. Put simply, Barclays is financing and profiting from climate chaos, and accepting a sponsorship deal from them is an endorsement of these actions, the letter said. The campaign group claims the AELTC's decision to team up with Barclays is not only bad for the environment, but also inconsistent with Wimbledon's cultural legacy and environmental policies. As outlined in your 2023 climate strategy, your intent is to sustain the championships in a way that ensures we have positive impact on our environment. We will be honest, transparent, and act with integrity in what we can and cannot do. We do not believe sponsorship from Europe's largest funder of fossil fuels is consistent with this approach, the letter states. In a statement, the All England Club said it welcomed Barclays as the latest addition to our family of official partners. Barclays' commitment to creating access to sport for all is something that we are passionate about. Our ambition to have a positive impact on the environment is central to our day-to-day operations and is a core part of putting on a successful championships. We know this is one of the defining challenges of our times, and we are fully committed to playing our part, from using 100% renewable electricity and offering low carbon options on our menus to sending zero waste to landfill and promoting a culture of reuse We're working hard to achieve a positive environmental impact across all of our operations. Barclays said it believed it could make the greatest difference as a bank by working with customers and clients as they transition to a low-carbon business model, focusing on facilitating the finance needed to change business practices and scale new green technologies. Energy prices could spike this winter, forcing governments to step in and subsidise bills again, the head of the International Energy Agency has said. If the Chinese economy strengthens quickly and there is a harsh winter, gas prices could rise, putting pressure on consumers, Fatih Birol said. He added that the governments should push for energy saving and boost renewables. However, a UK government spokesperson said annual energy bills are set to fall by an average £430 this month. Gas prices soared after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, driving up energy bills around the world. A number of governments then stepped in with support for households, including in the UK, to try to soften the blow to consumers. The IEA is an agency that works with governments and industry to provide data analysis and recommend policies. Mr. Birol told the BBC's Today programme that many European governments made strategic mistakes, including an over-reliance on Russia for energy, and that foreign policy had been blindfolded by short-term commercial decisions. He said, "This winter we cannot rule out another spike in gas prices. In a scenario where the Chinese economy is very strong, buys a lot of energy from the markets, and we have a harsh winter, we may see strong upward pressure under natural gas prices, which in turn will put an extra burn on consumers." The Chinese economy has been bouncing back after COVID restrictions were lifted, but recently its economy has been slowing down. Ratings agency S&P Global this week cut its forecast for Chinese growth, saying the risk is that its recovery loses more steam amid weak confidence among consumers and in the housing market. Investment banks, including Goldman Sachs, have also been cutting forecasts for Chinese growth. Nevertheless, Mr. Birol said governments, including UK, should continue to push measures to save energy, especially as we enter the winter. They should also push renewable technologies so they see the light of day as soon as possible and cut the time it takes for them to get permits and look for alternative energy options, he said. He wouldn't rule out blackouts this winter as part of the game. We do not know yet how strongly the Chinese economy will rebound. National Grid said last winter that short power cuts were a possibility in the UK. In the end, this was not necessary. A UK government spokesperson said we spent billions to protect families when prices rose over the winter, covering nearly half a typical household's energy bill, with them set to fall by around £430 on average from this month. Domestic gas and electricity bills in the UK fell at the weekend after a change to the energy price cap came into force, and a further smaller fall is expected this winter. However, with the annual energy bill of a typical household set to be about £2,000, costs are still much higher than the pre-pandemic norm. Last week, the head of Centrica, which owns British Gas, warned energy bills were likely to stay high for the foreseeable future. Russia's war in Ukraine led to a gold rush of new fossil fuel exploration, and the UK defied climate warnings by issuing a new licensing round for North Sea oil and gas. More than 100 applications have been submitted to drill for new oil and gas in the North Sea. This was at odds with international climate scientists who say fossil fuel projects should be closed down, not expanded. They say there can be no new projects if there is a chance to be keeping global temperature rises under 1.5 centigrades. Mr. Birol said if the world is serious about the climate cause, then we have to reduce the use of oil and gas significantly in the next few years to come. If we can reduce consumption, existing oil and gas fields will be enough to meet declining demand. He said he has discussions with the chief executives of UK oil companies. Mr. Birol said he has no problem with the oil firms making profits, but if they say I'm going to increase my production by 4 million barrels per day, and my company's strategy is in line with the Paris Climate Agreement, it doesn't work. There is a problem here. The Rosebank field in the North Sea, which has the potential to produce 500 million barrels of oil, could be approved by the government within weeks. The UK government said it was committed to reaching net zero by 2050 and have already come a long way to meet that target, cutting emissions faster than any other G7 country, while keeping the economy growing and with low carbon sources like renewables and nuclear providing half of the UK's electricity generation. but a spokesperson added the transition to cleaner energy cannot happen overnight and will continue to need oil and gas over the next coming decades, as recognised by the Independent Climate Change Committee. Emma Pinchbeck, the chief executive of Energy UK, which represents British energy companies, told the BBC's Today programme that the long-term solution to high bills is to invest in renewables and energy efficiency to make sure that we're not reliant on volatile international gas. We expect that investment in more infrastructure, in renewables and energy efficiency and alternative technologies to deliver cheaper bills in the long run, and that's why it's so important that we move quickly, particularly with increased international competition for these technologies. In order to get a more enterprising home, what you need to do is to get a water efficient shower, and this is free of charge from your water company and uses showers rather than baths. You should consider loft insulation, which says it costs around £460 for a typical semi-detached home and could save £355 a year on gas bills. You need to hang out washing instead of using a tumble dryer and walk instead of drive when possible. Use windy days to feel where droughts are in the house. Wetting the back of your hand helps to locate them. Then use insulation or drought proofing tape, and when available press the small button to use less water to flush the toilet. Electric car maker Tesla says it delivered a record number of vehicles in the 3 months to the end of June after cutting prices to boost sales. It has lowered prices in markets including the US, UK and China to compete with rival manufacturers. This weekend, major Chinese car makers also reported a surge in sales in June. Earlier this year, Tesla boss Elon Musk said he believed pursuing higher sales with lower profits was the right choice for the company. On Sunday, Tesla said it delivered 466,140 vehicles in the second quarter, which was more than 80% higher than a year earlier. Meanwhile, the company said it had increased vehicle production to nearly 480,000 in the same period. Tesla has made a strategic choice to be a volume manufacturer. Bill Russo, the founder and chief executive of advisory firm Automobility, has said. This was the main contributor to the sales increase, as its mainly higher volume Model 3 and Model Y benefited from the price war. Dan Ives from investment firm Wedbush Securities has said that the price cuts in China has been a smart poker move that was massively successful for Tesla. China is Tesla's second largest market after North America, the firm being cutting prices in the world's second largest economy, where it faces competition from local electric car makers. Over the weekend, Beijing-based Li Auto said its deliveries had hit an all-time high of 32,575 in June, making its third consecutive monthly sales record. Meanwhile, deliveries by Shanghai-based Nio and Guangzhou-based Xipeng jumped to 10,707 and 8,620 respectively during the month. Tesla has also been grappling with increased competition in other parts of the world and the impact of higher borrowing costs for customers. It has responded by cutting prices this year. In April, Tesla said it had no plans to stabilise the prices of its vehicles, even though its repeated price cuts had dented profits. "We're not starting a price war, we're just lowering prices to enable affordability at scale," Mr. Musk wrote on his social media platform Twitter. At the firm, Tesla said that its overall revenue had risen by almost a quarter in the past quarter from a year ago, as car sales increased. However, its profits for the same period dropped by 24% because of price cuts and higher costs of raw materials and other commodities. The company is due to report its financial results for the second quarter on the 19th of July. Some manufacturers are refusing to hire young people because they are worried about their reliability, a study has revealed. Shropshire Chamber of Commerce said its quarterly survey showed some businesses were having trouble with younger people failing to turn up. As a result, they were no longer seeking under 21s. Ruth Ross, the Chamber's chief executive, said getting the right staff is still proving difficult. She said interview no-shows or younger recruits, not even completing their first week, is hampering the manufacturing industries. The Chamber said hundreds of businesses responded to its survey, which is carried out anonymously. It said recruitment had been one of the biggest concerns noted in the survey for the past 18 months, but this is the first time any of the respondents have commented about specific problems they are having with younger recruits. The Chamber's previous chief executive, Richard Sheehan, said he believed more could be done to prepare young people for the world of work, but he also said it should be recognised that there are some fantastic young people working in our businesses across Shropshire doing amazing and incredible things. Businesses also said they have frustrations over the speed some customers were paying, interest rates and falling profitability because of rising costs. One hospitality business said, "We are charging more for our services, but not in line with increased staff costs. We also have increased food, wine and tax costs, so it is not ideal for a restaurant." The report covers the period between April and June this year, and also noted a reduction in the amount of investment in plant machinery and training across Shropshire during the second quarter of the year. One of the UK's largest private pension firms has backed Thames Water to turn around its finances and performance after fears the firm could collapse. Universities Superannuation Scheme (USS), a major investor in the water firm, is the first to publicly support it as it looks to secure extra funding. Thames Water is billions of pounds in debt and there has been calls for it to be nationalised. USS said the firm could benefit from having it among its shareholders. "We know that leakage and sewage remain major issues, but we also know there are no quick fixes. We're a complex network of pipes stretching for miles, some of which have been in the ground for 150 years, need to be replaced," said USS Group Chief Executive Bill Galvin. Mr. Galvin added improvements would take time and added significant investment is needed. Thames Water, which serves a quarter of the UK population, has faced heavy criticism over its performance in recent years due to sewage discharges and leaks. The company leaks more water than any other water company in the UK, losing the equivalent of up to 250 Olympic-sized swimming pools every day from its pipes. Its chief executive, Sarah Bentley, resigned last week, weeks after she was asked to forego her bonus over the company's handling of sewage spills. Thames Water is a private company owned by a group of investors, with the largest being the Canadian pension fund OMERS, with 31.8%. It has declined to comment on the water firm's current situation, but USS, a pension fund for UK academics and the second biggest investor with a 19.7% stake, is the first to announce its support. "We have given our backing to Thames Water's turnaround plan and net zero roadmap and engage with them regularly to support their long-term strategy," Mr. Galvin said in a note to staff, which was first reported by the Financial Times. "We remain one of the few that, with an appropriate regulatory environment, the long-term objective of repairing important UK infrastructure and paying pensions to our members are in strong alignment." Thames Water said last week that it was trying to raise the cash it needs to improve. It said it was keeping water regulator Ofwat informed on progress and that it still had strong cash and borrowing reserves to draw on. The government has said it was ready to act in a worst-case scenario if Thames Water collapsed. Regardless of what happens, water supplies will continue as normal for customers. Last year, Thames Water's owners, including USS, pumped £500 million into the business and pledged a further £1 billion to help it improve. But the company is understood to be struggling to raise the remaining cash, which it needs to service its substantial debt pile, which is around £14 billion. Interest payments on more than half of its debts are linked to the rate of inflation, which has soared over the last year. Other water firms are also facing similar pressures due to higher interest rates and payments on their debts and rising costs, including higher energy and chemical prices. Shell is still trading Russian gas more than a year after pledging to withdraw from the Russian energy market. The company was involved in nearly an eighth of Russia's shipborne gas exports in 2022, according to analysis from campaign group Global Witness. Oleg Ostenko, an advisor to Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, accused Shell of accepting blood money. Shell said the trades were the result of long-term contractual commitments and do not violate laws or sanctions. As recently as the 9th of May, a vast tanker capable of carrying more than 160,000 cubic meters of gas compressed into liquid form, liquefied natural gas or LNG, pulled out of the port of Sabeta on the Yamal Peninsula in Russia's far north. That cargo was purchased by Shell before heading onwards to its ultimate destination, Hong Kong. It is one of 8 LNG cargoes that Shell has brought from Yamal this year, according to data from the Kepler database analysed by Global Witness. Last year, Shell accounted for 12% of Russia's seaborne LNG trade. Global Witness calculates and was among the top 5 traders of Russian-originated LNG that year. In March 2022, in the weeks following the invasion of Ukraine, Shell apologised for buying a cargo of Russian oil and said it intended to withdraw from Russian oil and gas. It said that it would stop buying Russian oil, sell its service stations and other businesses in Russia, which it has done. It has also ended its joint ventures with the state energy giant Gazprom. And it said it would start a phased withdrawal from Russian petroleum products, pipeline gas and LNG, but it warned that it would be a complex challenge. Since then, it has kept taking cargoes of LNG from 2 Russian ports, the one at Yamal and one at Sakhalin in the Far East. Shell used to be a minority investor in the Sakhalin gas project, but abandoned that claim in September last year after the Russian government transferred its shares to a local business, and since then has taken no gas from Sakhalin. But it still honours the contract with the Russian LNG company Novatek, which obliges it to buy 900,000 tonnes a year from Yamal until the 2030s, according to the Reuters news agency. Novatek is Russia's second biggest gas company, and the taxes it pays are a significant contributor to the Russian government's budget. Oleg Ostenko, an advisor to the Ukrainian president, said it is quite simple. By continuing to trade in Russian gas, Shell is putting money into Putin's pockets and helping to fund Russia's brutal aggression against the people of Ukraine. The vast sums that Shell and the whole oil industry have made in Russia should be used to help fund the reconstruction of Ukraine, rather than lining the pockets of their shareholders. A spokesman for Shell said Shell has stopped buying Russian LNG on the spot market but still has some long-term contractual commitments. This is in full compliance with sanctions, applicable laws and regulations of the countries in which we operate. There is a dilemma between putting pressure on the Russian government over its atrocities in Ukraine and ensuring stable, secure energy supplies. It is for governments to decide on the incredibly difficult trade-offs that must be made. Shell is the world's largest trader of LNG, which is not subject to European sanctions, making billions of dollars in profits trading oil and gas last year. Russia massively reduced its deliveries of gas by pipeline last year, but has increased the amount of gas it supplies by ship, including to Europe. The gas has not imported any Russian gas. The UK has not reported any Russian gas for over a year, while EU politicians are trying to reduce the amount of Russian LNG the bloc imports. In March, the EU's Energy Commissioner, Kadri Simpson, called on countries and firms to stop buying Russian gas and not to sign new contracts. It is long overdue that the trading of Russian LNG is looked at with the same disgust as Russian oil trading. Targeting Putin's energy income cannot be about symbolic measures, but must concretely put a stop to the huge fossil fuel sums that cement his power, said Jonathan Noronhan-Gant, senior campaigner at Global Witness. The France-based energy company Total Energies is a minority shareholder in the Yamal project and was also a major trader in Russian LNG, the Global Witness analysis reported. Rishi Sunak has accused Australia of breaking the spirit of cricket over the controversial dismissal of England's Jonny Bairstow on Sunday. Batsman Bairstow was stumped in the second Ashes test after walking away from his position in the apparent belief the over had ended. The contentious wicket has overshadowed Australia's 43-run win against the host at Lord's. Australia captain Pat Cummins said it was a fair dismissal within the rules, but his England counterpart Ben Stokes said although he agreed Bairstow was out, he wouldn't have wanted to win a game in that manner. The incident led to the Marylebone Cricket Club (MCC), which owns Lord's, suspending 3 members over confrontations with Australia's players. Bairstow was given out after wandering out of his crease at the end of an over during the final day of the second Ashes test, with Australia's wicketkeeper Alex Carey then throwing down his stumps. England coach Brendan McCullum said the batsman believed the umpires had declared the over finished, which would mean the ball was dead. The dismissal was referred to the off-field third umpire, however, who decided it was still in play and Bairstow was indeed out. Asked on Monday whether Mr Sunak believed Australia's actions were not in keeping with the spirit of cricket, his spokesman said yes. The Prime Minister agrees with Ben Stokes. He said he simply wouldn't want to win a game in the manner Australia did, the spokesman added. Australia head coach Andrew McDonald defended his team's actions, saying he didn't see too many issues with it. There is no doubt that when a player is leaving their crease, that you take that opportunity, he added. Cricket's laws say the ball is dead when it is clear to the bowler's end umpire that the fielding side and both batters at the wicket have ceased to regard it as in play. Stokes said when it is justified that the umpires have called over, is the on-field umpires making movement? Is that enough to call over? I'm not sure. I'm not disputing the fact it is out because it is out, he added. Would I want to win a game in that manner? The answer for me is no. The dismissal, which left England needing 178 runs with 4 wickets left, created a hostile atmosphere, with Australia's team being booed by the traditional subdued Lord's crowd. It also led to angry exchanges in the long room, an area outside the team dressing rooms, between Australia's players Usman Khawaja and David Warner and spectators. The MCC said it had suspended 3 of its members after completely unacceptable scenes and apologised to the Australian team. A cross-party backlash is expected over government plans to fine public bodies who initiate boycotts against Israel. Critics argue it is inconsistent with long-standing UK foreign policy towards the occupied Palestinian territories and could prevent support for groups around the world facing persecution. The bill aims to stop councils pursuing their own foreign policy agendas, the government says. It says it would ensure the UK speaks with one voice internationally. The bill, which is being debated on Monday, seeks to prevent public bodies, including councils, from campaigning against boycotting or sanctioning a particular international territory unless that is endorsed by the UK government's foreign